Welcome once again to our Monday night Bible study here at U-Turn for Christ, the women's facility. And tonight we're going to finish Matthew chapter 14. So just kind of a quick review, Matthew chapter 14. It starts off being introduced to Herod, the Tetrarch. And he's on a tear because of the things he's heard about Jesus, reminds him of John the Baptist. He thinks Jesus is the reincarnation. We see John getting his head cut off. The disciples are grieving. They bury the body and they go and tell Jesus. And he says, I know what you guys need is just some rest and quiet, and we should probably go pray and take it easy. So they leave and they end up on the other side of the sea, watching Jesus now teach and heal people throughout the rest of the day. And now it's become evening, everybody's hungry. And now they want to try to feed all these people. None of this was restful, right? And there was the miraculous feeding of about 15 to 20,000 people. It says there was 5,000 men, not including the women and children that accompanied them. So here we're picking up verse 22. It's right after all that has happened. The 5,000 have just eaten. So the story or whatever Jesus was trying to teach his disciples in that moment with feeding the 5,000, that we'll find as we get through tonight, they didn't quite get it. They didn't quite learn. That teaching continued on as they were pushed onto the boat by Jesus and are sent out to sea. He's going to continue to try to hammer that thought through. That we'll get to that. Let me pray. We'll read the text and dig in. Lord, we just want to come before you and ask that you would be our teacher. Lord, I pray for divine appointments tonight for each one of us, Lord. I know that you've spoken and had me live out some very specific things that have to do with this text, Lord. And I pray that you would do that and challenge the hearers same way tonight. Speak directly to their hearts in an effort to transform their lives and help all of us to see you and know you perhaps in a deeper, newer, fresher way. Lord, teach us about ourselves and our weaknesses. Just sort us out and help us to courageously do something about it and walk differently because we've encountered you. We put this teaching, this time before you, Lord. I ask your blessing in Jesus' name. Amen. So Jesus walks on the sea. Verse 22. So there's the feeding of the 5,000. It says, immediately Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side, while he sent the multitudes away. And when he had sent the multitudes away, he went up on the mountain and by himself to pray. Now, when evening had came, he was there alone. But the boat was now in the middle of the sea, tossed by the waves, for the wind was contrary. Now in the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went to them walking on the sea. And when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, is this a ghost? And they cried out for fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, be of good cheer, it is I. Do not be afraid. And Peter asked him and said, Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you into the water. So he said, come. And when Peter had come down the boat, he walked on the water to Jesus. But when he saw the wind was boisterous, he was afraid and began to sink and cried out, saying, Lord, save me. And immediately Jesus stretched out his hand and caught him and said to him, O you of little faith, why did you doubt? And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased. And those who were in the boat came and worshipped him, saying, truly, you are the Son of God. When they crossed over, they came to the land of Gennesaret. And when the men of that place recognized him, they sent out into all the surrounding region and brought to him all who were sick and begged him that they might only touch the hem of his garment. And as many as touched it were made perfectly well. So that's where we're at. A lot going on. Let's get right to it. Verse 22, it says, immediately Jesus made his disciples get into the boat. Now, there's something that happened between feeding the 5,000 and this miraculous event that everyone just saw, and now Jesus is making these guys get on the boat. You're like, no, but we want to hang out. No, get on the boat. But this is great. Everyone's excited. Get on the boat. But aren't you coming with us? Just get on the boat. They don't want to. He's making them get on the boat. What in the world could have happened? John tells us in his account, John chapter 6, verse 14 and 15, says, then those men, the ones that just got fed, the 5,000 men, then those men, when they had seen the sign that Jesus did, said, this is truly the prophet who has come into the world. Therefore, it says, when Jesus perceived that they were about to come and take him by force and force him to be king, he departed and again to the mountain by himself to be alone. This gives us some insight as to what was happening on the boat, and Jesus just feeding the 5,000. They realized this is the guy we're looking for. This is the king. He's gonna slay Rome. He can feed us whenever he wants to, miraculously. This is it. And they were ready to put the crown on Jesus and just bypass the cross altogether. Jesus said no. King was a political title. They had seen what Jesus has done, and they must have thought, like I said, this is our guy, our king, our rescuer. And they're hyping him up. And they're like, yeah, they're getting all, and the disciples are getting all excited too. And that's why Jesus was pushing them on the boat. Hey, don't get caught up in this. It's not time for this. This is not how it's supposed to go. The disciples didn't understand. Well, this is a good thing, Jesus. I thought it was maybe, no, get on the boat. They wanted Jesus to be their politician, to be their president, so to speak. You know, presidential candidates make all kinds of promises that end up getting them elected. You think even in school politics, right? When you run for president of your class or whatever, you're like, I promise we're gonna have tacos every Tuesday, and the thing, you know, and everyone's like, yeah, we like that. Oh yeah, and then you end up, because you're popular and you're giving the people what they want, they're gonna just usher you into being king. That's exactly what happened here. They saw what Jesus was doing. The teaching was pretty good. The healings were awesome. The food was delicious. And this is it. This is the guy. This is everything. And we don't need to wait for nothing, especially a cross. That didn't make sense. But Jesus knew. He's looking and he's saying that in his mind, Jesus is probably thinking the cross must come before the crown. This day will happen, but not right now. Jesus simply showed them what he could do and who he could be for them. But again, they were like, that's great. Let's get you a crown. They were drunk with excitement and all the show of it, you know, and they were just like, you know, we gotta make this guy the ruler. He's going to take down Rome. He's going to set up the kingdom. This is going to be awesome. Morris, the commentator, says this, but to Jesus, the prospect of an earthly kingdom was nothing else than the temptation of the devil. And he decisively rejected it. Nope, that's not what I want. That's not what I came here for. That's not how that gets set up. This whole scene that everyone was excited about, Jesus would look and say, nah, this is satanic. This is a temptation. I'm not doing it. Jesus sees that the disciples are getting caught in the uproar. And it says that he made the disciples get in the boat. They didn't want to, but Jesus knew it was safer for them in the deadly storm in this boat than it would be for them to be in this encounter and getting caught up in the hoopla and the hype of what was happening. That was far more dangerous. So he sends them out into the storm, knowing what they're going to face. He knew that there was going to be wind and waves, and he knew everything that was going to happen to them. And he also knew that in their own strength, could not possibly do it. But he sent them out anyway. Just go do this, even though it doesn't make sense, even though you can't do it. You'll find out that you can't do it. It's okay. I want you to do it. Meanwhile, Jesus is still looking to get that rest from when he heard about John getting his head cut off. And so he went up to the mountain by himself to pray. It says when he got the disciples into the boat and to go before him to the other side, he sent the multitudes away. And when he sent the multitudes away, he went up to the mountain to pray by himself. You know, this is amazing because we see that Jesus, time and time again, it seems he longed for those precious moments to get alone with his Father in prayer. And this is something that he wouldn't just neglect or put off. And it's a good example for us to glean or to learn from. I think one of the things that Jesus may have wanted to do was to kind of clean himself off or recenter himself from hearing all that hype. All these people want to, and he want to make himself low again. No, Lord, that's not what I came for. This isn't the cup I came to drink. I didn't come for the crown. I came for the cross. And Father, help me get back on task. He was fighting the humanity of it all by reaching out to his divine Father. To some extent, that's what he was praying about. We don't really know. We could ask him. We know that he was praying for these guys in the boat. It says in verse 24, but when the boat was now in the middle of the sea, tossed by the waves, for the wind was contrary. So here, there's this boat that they're in the middle of the sea. The disciples are out rowing across the sea. It would have been a 6-mile trip to go back pretty much exactly where they came from, just across the northern tip of the sea. And here they are in the middle, probably about 3 to 4 miles into that 6-mile trip. And they find that the wind is contrary, and you're being tossed by waves back and forth. Now, contrary means opposite. So they're going against the current, against the grain, so to speak. There's clashing, it's conflicting. The wind was against them, the waves were against them, and the sideways rain that was blowing right at them in their face, stinging them maybe, it was all against them. So they're rowing with all their might, and they're not moving an inch. It takes every bit of their energy just to maintain the spot where they're at. They're not going forward. They're not going backwards. They're just trying not to lose ground. They're literally like spinning wheels stuck in the mud. But if they stop, they would be blown right back to where they came from. They're not quitting. These guys are just going to keep going and keep going and keep going. So here they are in the middle of the sea, fighting this battle, fighting the storm. Meanwhile, Jesus is praying. Jesus is up praying, and there they are rowing their tails off. You know, Jesus knew about the storm when he sent them. He knew it was going to come. He knew it was going to happen. And for a good reason, he sends them out there. Jesus is waiting for them to come to the end of themselves, to be completely wasted, gassed out, have no strength left. He knew this is exactly what it would take to get them to just realize, I can't do this on my own, and really get to the point where they're in fear of their life. We may just die. He's going to be teaching them through this. The point for them and for us is this: Jesus often makes us get into the boat and weather the storm so that we will completely run out of gas and realize that we can't do it on our own, and that we will then learn to lean on him and trust him. Reminds me of a proverb that has been a favorite of mine for some time. years ago, Sarah gave it to Jody, and Jody had been sharing it with me, and it's just stuck ever since. Proverb 29:19. A servant will not be corrected by mere words, for though he understands, he will not respond. See, there is a lesson in this boat where these guys are going to be rowing and get nowhere, and they're just going to end up exhausted and not being able to accomplish the goal. They're just going to be spent. There is a lesson in that Jesus couldn't just sit down and teach them elegantly through scripture and spiritual principle. He wasn't going to get that across with mere words, just teaching them, just talking to them about it. Sure, he could have explained the principle. Hey, guys, I'm going to put you in this boat. There's going to be a storm. You're going to run out of gas, and then I'm going to show up and help you. They would understand that in theory and principle and almost say, all right, I get it. I don't need to go in the boat. I already understand. I know what you're trying to do. I understand. But that's not enough. He says, get on the boat. Go through it. It actually has to happen to you. Understanding the words, having the ability to comprehend isn't enough for what he's doing for these guys right here. Because they clearly didn't get it just with the bread, the miraculous event alone of feeding the 5,000. Something still didn't click. You can't do, you need Jesus. You can't do this without him. You don't have enough in and of yourself to feed 5,000 guys. You need to bring what little you have to Jesus. It wasn't clicking, so he said, get on the boat. I got something for you. He does it to each one of us, sometimes daily. Go through this. Do this thing that you absolutely cannot succeed in so that I can show up and blow your minds. And so we get out there and we start rowing. That's what he wants for us. Here's the thing that's crazy. These disciples had been there before. They've been in that boat, the same water, and a storm that was exactly like it. Matthew chapter 8. Here they are in a boat. The wind and the waves rise up. But this time, in chapter 8, Jesus is on the boat. And now they're just freaking out because, oh, he's asleep. We're all going to die. And Jesus is sleeping. What's going on? So they wake him up, and you know the story. He turns first and rebukes the disciples. What were you worried about? You have little faith, right? And then he rebukes the wind and the waves. He shuts them up, it says. Done. Calm, like glass. Now they're in a storm, but it's even worse because Jesus isn't even on the boat. What are we going to do? They may have thought, we're going to die. Help, they would cry out as they're praying. Perhaps they were just about to give in to the idea that this is the end. We're going to die. And they're encouraging each other. And they're like, no, just one more. Just keep rowing a little bit more. We don't know. Come on, just keep, don't give up just yet. Here they are, ready to give in. Verse 25. Now at the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went to them walking on the sea. The fourth watch was the last quarter of the day or time. It was the last watch. This is the hours of 3 to 6 a.m. So if you think about it, it says in verse 22, immediately Jesus made the disciples get into the other side of the boat, and he sent them away. And when he had sought the multitudes, he went up to pray himself. Now, when evening came, he was alone. Let's just assume, because all these people just ate. It was late, like, oh, they hadn't eaten yet. And this is all connected, same story. 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, Jesus is putting these guys on the boat. Now it's like somewhere between 3 to 6 a.m. They've been rowing for about 8 to 12 hours. They're done. They are toast. Muscles burning. Their backs are stinging them in agony. And they're just trying to survive and not die. Not gaining any ground, just stuck. Mark chapter 6, verse 48, his account of this says this. Then Jesus saw them straining and rowing, for the wind was against them. Now about the fourth watch of the night, he came to them, walking on the sea, and would have passed them by. So in Mark's account, he sees them. right? He's about 3 miles away, up on a mountain, praying to the Father, and he sees them in the middle of the night, in the middle of a storm, right? That's amazing. Supernatural sight to be able to see. The point is, he sees us as well in the middle of our stormy seas, in the middle of our trials, even though it may seem like he's miles away on a mountain and it's dark. And how could he possibly know? And he saw here, he was able to see them rowing, maybe even able to hear their conversations. Clearly, he was able to hear their prayers as he's praying for them to the Father, making intercession like we read in Hebrews. He lives to do that, to intercede for us daily, constantly. Think about it. These guys may have been losing their minds, struggling, rowing, and felt all alone, not knowing what's going to happen next. This doesn't make any sense. But Jesus sees them. Charles Spurgeon said this apostolic crew, that one got stuck. This apostolic crew rowed and rowed and rowed. And it was no fault of theirs that they made no progress, for the wind was contrary or against them. The Christian man or woman may make little or no headway, and yet it may be no fault of his or hers, for the wind is contrary. Our good Lord will take the will for the deed or the effort that you're trying and reckon it our progress, not by your apparent advance, but by the hearty intent with which we tug at the oars. That's all he was looking for. Are you guys going to keep, are you just going to be faithful? I told you to go. Are you going to keep going? Or are you going to give up? You know, can you just follow the command even in the middle of the storm when it seems like it's killing you? So he came to them walking on the sea, and in Mark's account, it said, and would have passed them by. You imagine a storm that they're terrified is probably going to kill them, and they're not able to they're rowing their butts off and they're not moving an inch. And all of a sudden they see a guy walking effortlessly through that same storm. The wind that's got them pinned in place, Jesus is just cutting through with the breeze and walking as if he wanted to, he was just going to walk on by, just casual, like, okay, you guys, you're still struggling, huh? See ya. Right? But he doesn't just pass them by. That's crazy. That blows my mind. This wind and rain that was holding the disciples in place, it didn't even ruffle his hair or his clothing. He's just walking like he would, like a stroll on a beach on a nice calm day. When they saw Jesus, they thought it's a ghost, and they shrieked and cried like little girls. Ah! You know, what is this? Because what I'm thinking is they couldn't see clearly. All that rain in your face and the waves crashing. Is that just foam? Oh, no, it looks like a person. I don't know what person it is. Who could possibly do that but some kind of ghostly, scary thing, right? So they weren't able to see him clearly until they heard his voice. Hearing what Jesus had to say helped them to clearly see. He says, be of good cheer. It is I. I believe that the words there are, be of good cheer. It's I am. Don't be afraid. It's I am. Just like he said to Moses at the bush. It's I am. God's word has a way of calming us even before the storm is calm, if you have ears to hear. If you had been hearing him the whole time and are able to recognize that voice even in the storm, it might not look like Jesus, but when he says, be of good cheer, you're like, oh, I know. Do I know that voice? It's all right, guys. Jesus is here. Don't quit rowing yet, but he's here. It's going to be all right. Jesus speaks and it brings comfort so that we can see this problem isn't as big as we thought. This isn't as doom and gloomy as we originally thought. Like, we're going to be okay. Jesus is here. And we can see that Jesus is the solution, the only solution. He is much bigger and stronger than any of our troubles or all of our troubles combined, right? So now, verse 28, Peter said to him, Lord, if it is you, command me to come out into the water. It's really, Lord, since this is you, now that I know it's you, and since you're there, command me to come out onto the water. Peter, wanting to be closer to Jesus. Hey, since that's you, why don't you just say the word and I'll join you? So he does. I think Peter realized it was safer to be with Jesus walking on the water than to be in that boat. He felt more comfortable, even though it was completely foreign, never seen anyone do it before. He'd rather just be with Jesus. Well, that's the way it was last time. That's where I'd want to be. If I was on a boat and Jesus was taking a nap in a storm, I just want to lay down and take a nap with Jesus, right? That's kind of where Peter's at. Oh, there's Jesus. That's where I want to be, because I don't know. It's bad over here in the boat. And it's a demonstration of his faith, right? He walked on the water to go to Jesus. Charles Spurgeon says, what a sight, Jesus and Peter, hand in hand, walking upon the sea. The only two people would ever do it. But when Peter saw that the wind was boisterous, he was afraid and began to sink. Oh no. Think about this. Excuse me. Here's Peter leaving the boat, walking out in the water. The storm never changed the whole time. It didn't get worse when he went out of the boat. It didn't stop and start again. It was consistently terrible the whole way through. So how did he go from being afraid to not, to all of a sudden being afraid and sinking? What changed? Well, when Peter started, all he cared about was Jesus. Oh, there's Jesus. That's where I want to go. And keeping his eyes on Jesus and just walking towards Jesus. And when Peter did this, the storm seemed small and insignificant. It was just in his peripherals. It wasn't the main thing. Jesus was. But when Peter took his eyes off Jesus and began to look around, that's when he started to sink. So it wasn't so much what he saw that made him sink. It's what he stopped looking at that made him sink, or allowed him to sink. Chuck Smith said this: so many people say, oh, there goes Peter on his way to another failure. Everyone wants to poke holes at Peter. Yeah, he sank. He didn't do it, right? He's the only one that did it. He's the only one that got out of the boat. Chuck Smith says, you show me a man who has never failed, and I'll show you a man that's never done anything. So if you're failing, that's great. It was great for Peter. It's great for me. It means you're actually doing something. It's no excuse to keep failing, but it's evident that you're at least doing something. You're trying. He begins then, as he's sinking, to cry out, saying, Lord, save me. You know, we don't all walk as well as Peter did. Some of us are like the other guys who just stay on the boat. Not quite, don't have, he's going to say, Peter, you have little faith. Well, what did those guys have? No faith at all? And they were just worried about the next meal, or still scared they're going to die, or we'll get to that, maybe what they thought in a second. He begins seeking and he says, Lord, save me. And like I said, some of us don't walk like Peter did. Some of us are like those guys in the boat. But when we do step out of the boat, like Peter, we may and probably will at some point fall or begin to sink. And that's okay. It's okay. Because it is then that we need to know that we can call on the Lord, saying, Lord, save me. He says, Um, oh, you of little faith. It wasn't, Clark says this, it wasn't the violent winds or the raging waves which endangered his life, but the littleness of his faith. I have some notes here about little faith. This little faith made it easy to be distracted and for doubt to come in. This little faith led to sinking or falling short. But then again, little faith is better than no faith. A little faith will obey the words of Jesus. It will struggle to come to Jesus, even when it seems difficult. Little faith will accomplish great things for a season or a time. Little faith will even pray when there are times of trouble. Lord, get me out of this, please. It's a little faith. But a little faith is still weak. It needs to improve. It needs to grow. Because the same little faith is often too eager for signs and wonders. Little faith wants to be all about the big things, speaking in tongues and people levitating, and let's raise the dead out of the graves, and we're going to heal people miraculously. They want to see all these signs and wonders, but they can't just do the basics like love your neighbor as yourself and be peaceable with all men. And it has too high opinion of its own power. Little faith thinks it's really something. It's a weakness. Little faith is often too affected by its surroundings. It's easily moved. They wake up in the morning and something happens and they are bothered for the whole day. These people with little faith wake up thirsty for an offense. Walking around, looking you in the eye. Go ahead, say something. Upset me. Watch what happens. Rub me the wrong way. I dare you. I'm ready for it. I need a fight. That's little faith. Or maybe no faith. Maybe it's just sinful. But it's easily moved. And then it makes a mountain out of a molehill. I'm going to die. This is the end. It's never going to work. Oh, it's a big, you're like, no, it's just the dishes. It's just groceries. It's just a kid who won't shut up. It's annoying. It's a cold. It's a flat tire. It's 8 months at U-turn. It's just something, but it's not that. You've just made it so much bigger because of the little faith. So he goes on to say, oh, you have little faith. Why did you doubt? The word doubt here, France, the commentator says, doubt is literally being divided in two. Doubt means you're split in your thinking. Double-minded, James would say. Whereas true faith is single-mindedly focused on Jesus. The true faith is like, oh, I know it's only a molehill, but it seems like a mountain, and then it goes right back to Jesus. This stinks. I hate it. Yeah, but Jesus. I can't believe they're doing. Yeah, Jesus. It just runs right back to Jesus. Like Peter. I can walk on water. I'm sinking, but Jesus, help. Right? It's single-minded. But why did he doubt? Why was there sinking? Let's look at James chapter 1, verses 5 through 8. I'll just read it quickly. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives to all liberally without reproach, and it will be given to him. But let him ask in faith with no doubting, for he who doubts is like a wave of the sea, driven and tossed by the wind. For let not that man suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord. He is double-minded and unstable in all his ways. When we doubt, we shouldn't expect to receive anything from the Lord. When we stand there not trusting him, we should expect to be unstable in all our ways, completely just outside our right mind some days. Because we have no solid foundation. What are you standing on? When you're that divided, a house divided against itself will fall, right? We've heard these things before. Why did you doubt? It's a question we should all ask ourselves. The root, I'm convinced, in my own life, the root of all our issues and the source of pride oftentimes is that I simply do not trust God. Now, maybe generally as a whole I do, but there's some area, if I will look in to my situation and really have it out with, Lord, what about this? Why did I do this? If I'm completely honest and I allow the living word to dissect me and to just run through me, I will come to this conclusion all the time that I am doubting, I am not trusting in some area 100% of the time. And for me, that's where it ends up. Let me explain. With some issue, there's always this place of doubting, whether if it's a matter of, will God do this? I'm not sure if he will or if he won't. Or I know he's going to do it, but I'm not sure when. It's taking kind of long. And it puts me in a position where doubt could come in and I'll take it into my own hands. Is God going to do this or not? And if he is, when? And I can't wait. And so I react and I do what I want because I'm not sure if he will. And I do it when I want because I'm not sure when he's going to do it. And I find myself in trouble. How did I get here? How did this happen? We'll use my drug addiction as an example. So many times I've gone through programs thinking I was doing quite well, said the right things, was really smart, talked about all the deep, esoteric, fancy things of the Bible, missing a lot of the basic principles along the way, and would leave thinking, I'm great. I got this figured out. I got lots of pats on the back. I got a certificate. Everyone told me I'm so smart. I know a lot about I'm a great prayer. I'm a great reader. I'm a great teacher. I'm all these things. And would literally feel like the heroin, the crack, all of it just jumped out of the bushes and mugged me. Wham! And I find myself addicted, strung out, hard, going through life. How did this happen? I did so well. I graduated this program. I went here. I did this. Like the scripture we talked about last night. Lord, Lord, I did this and I didn't mean anything. It was just stuff. I missed something. How did I end up here? When I trace it all back, I made very poor choices and really bad decisions because I was doubting. Didn't really trust God. I could trace it back to where this is where I decided to choose the world over Jesus. This is where I decided to lean on my own understanding, which are all results of not trusting and doubting. I sank every time. I fell every time. And when the pain got great enough, and I found myself in a sea of sin and drugs and craziness, I put my hand up and yelled, Lord, save me. And he was faithful to pull me out again. And then I would do it again and again and again. And eventually, like Peter, I would end up getting back on the boat and moving on with my discipleship. But I spent a long time in the worldly tank, 20 years, matter of fact, before I realized how much of an idiot I was. Rowing, if you will, for 20 years, rowing, trying to get my white knuckling, my own strength to be completely exhausted. So I would say, all right, Lord, enough. I'm not in charge of I can't do this. And then I went from just being consumed and faced with my own weakness and the dread of it, the despair of it. Oh, I'm weak. I'm going to be weak forever. Look at me. I can never do it. To realizing like Paul, that's great because his strength is made perfect in my weakness. And so I stopped trying to make myself strong-willed and right all the time. And was just like, I'm just a goofball. And if Jesus doesn't show up, then this whole thing's going to wash away because I got nothing. And once I started camping out there, I was actually ready to be discipled. Why did you doubt? How did I get here? Why am I not trusting? So verse 32. Checking the time. All right. It says, and when they got into the boat, the wind ceased. Then those who were in the boat came and worshiped, saying to him, truly, you are the Son of God. They, Peter and Jesus, got into the boat, and then the wind ceased. So hold on a second, because I've missed this before. This means the whole time Peter is getting out of the boat, having a conversation with Jesus, going for a walk and sinking, the storm's continuing. The other guys are still freaking out. They're still rowing. There's still all that stuff still going on. It didn't stop. Imagine what they thought. Imagine what they were going through. These guys in the boat, thinking to themselves, we figured this out. We know how this works. Jesus shows up. He rebukes the wind and the waves, and then we're all safe. And we know how this goes because we've been through this before, right? They think they know something. And so they're like, oh, it's a ghost. No, it's Jesus. Great. Jesus, make it stop. And he says, no, not yet. I'm going to have a conversation with Peter. And they're like, what? Right? Are you, I thought you were going to make the storm stop. He doesn't. And the point is this. We can't just assume to figure out some formula or something as to how the Lord works. We don't know what he's trying to do, what he's trying to work out in us. We don't know. We're not that smart. We have to trust this process. And it may look different every single storm, every single time. He works best in us being completely uncomfortable in that way. As soon as we think we know something, he changes the game. All right, now I'm not going to be in the boat. Now I'm not going to make it stop right away. I'm going to go have a conversation with Peter and let the storm continue because you guys got some more stuff to work out. It's the idea that his ways are not our ways. We're not that smart. And then, so that these guys, the storm finally stops when Peter and Jesus get in the boat. And then those who were in the boat came and worshiped Jesus, saying, truly, you are the Son of God. And I think just that one moment was what all of that was for. Jesus getting them to come to that conclusion that they had not previously come to. Oh, wait, you're not just a prophet. You're not just this. You're not just, you are the Son of God. Revelation, minds were blown. All at once, they seemed to recognize who Jesus is and the limitless power he possesses. And it causes them to fall on their face. Also, in that moment, they seemed to shift gears from a complete unhealthy fear of the storm to a very healthy fear and awe of Jesus. Again, as a result, falling down and worshiping him. So they're worshiping him, right? Let me tell you, they were not singing Jesus culture. They weren't singing old hymns. No one broke out a fiddle. They probably weren't singing at all. That's not what worship is. We can sing as a form, but we can worship in our singing. But what worshiping is just recognizing who he is, making yourself lower to exalt him and saying, Lord, you are God. I am not. I need you. You are the Son of God. Truly. Here they are on their faces, crying out, you're holy. You are the true God. We get it. But they couldn't get there until they were completely wiped out. I mean, they got nothing left. Huffing and puffing and sweating and blisters and just done. And Jesus is like, now we can start. This is great. Now that you got nothing left, now we can start. Did you get it all out? Did you work it all out? Good. Let's start. And now you know who I am? For real, for real? All right. Let's start this. We got more things to come. In Mark's account, it says that when Jesus got on the boat and all these things happened, it says the disciples were greatly amazed beyond measure and marveled. Talk about doing far beyond all you could think or ask or imagine. Here it was happening. Mark also mentions that they had not really known what was going on or who Jesus was up until this point. Even after feeding the 5,000, it says their hearts were still hardened. They knew Jesus. They, like some of us Christians, we know scripture, we know the principle. If you pray and you do this, and we would even know this story. Yeah, I know if you get on the boat and if you step out in faith and this, and we can understand all the principles. But when it comes time to do it, hey, why don't you try living like this? Why don't you stop doing this? Why don't you start doing that? Really? Yeah, I know I'm supposed to. I know what that means. I understand. I speak English. I read my Bible. But no. Get on the boat. Go through the storm. Run yourself out of energy. And find Jesus on the other side of that in a way that you couldn't comprehend before. Now we can start. Now we can do something because you've come completely to the end of yourself. They needed that. Even you would think feeding the 5,000, right? The water into wine, all the other miracles, you would think that would be enough. But it wasn't just what they were seeing and receiving and believing. There was still something in them that needed to be killed and wiped out and drained out, catheterized. When you get cathetered, that has to go in and take the poison out of you because you can't push it out yourself. And that's what he's doing here. He's using a storm to draw something out of them that's getting in the way. Because their hearts were hardened. So you want to ask Jesus to soften your heart or your neighbor. Lord, they're hardened. Please soften them. Soften their heart. How many of us have prayed that prayer? Lord, please soften my heart towards them. So how does the Lord soften hearts? By sending them out on a boat to row for 10 hours, getting completely exhausted, coming to the end of themselves. Then he shows up in the last hour when they feel like they're about to die and says, cheer up, it's me, don't be afraid. Well, look, most people don't want to sign up for that. Most people, like the multitude, just were there for the food and the show. What can you give me, Lord? All right, I'm gone. See ya. John tells us in his account that while they were in awe, while they were worshiping and saying, truly, this is the Son of God, and they fell down and like, oh, this is so, right? That immediately they reached the land exactly where they had been heading. So they were worshiping him, and then all of a sudden, oh, we're here. So the place they couldn't get to for hours and hours and hours and hours, and they were still a few miles off. As soon as Jesus got on the boat, and they're like, oh, filled with tears and just sweaty and bloody and everything. Oh, Lord, this is so great. Truly, you're the Son of God. And boom, they hit the beach. Oh, here we are. Wow. Well, we couldn't get here on our own, but now that you're here, great. There's a process here. There's something that he's doing with these guys that he is trying to do with us. We just got to be willing to get on the boat and start rowing. We have to work this out. The work that was so hard and so dangerous had just been miraculously accomplished, showing them that you can't do this. You can't figure it out. You don't have the energy. You don't have what it takes to do it. And I don't need you to do it anyway. But if you'll get your mind right, if you go through this process, be exhausted, get to where you got to get to the end of yourself, I'll show up and make it happen. That's how it happened with the bread. That's how it's happening now. And he's trying to keep them in line and show them their part. Show them how he considers them and wants to include them. Show them that he's God, and they're not. Their hard work and efforts were not a waste of time. So often we would think that. Oh Lord, but I'm cutting the grass, and by the time I get to the end and I want to put the tractor away, I realize, well, now I got to start. It's already grown again. I got to, and this seems like, what am I doing? But it's all for something. There's something going on there. and they weren't failures just because they were out there getting nowhere. They weren't failures. Jesus had a purpose for this all the while. They had to experience what they could not do. They had to go out and try it and fail to see what they could not do. And in that, Jesus revealed their weakness. All right, that's a good start. They also had to experience, they did experience, and they did see Jesus in a new and powerful way. He was showing them not only what he could do for them, what he could do, but he was showing them who he could be for them. This is what I can do. This is what I'm capable of. I'm trustworthy. I am faithful. I love you. I'm praying for you. I'm fighting for you. And I'm about to go and die for you. This is who I can be for you. So that they would remember this when he's gone. And even though he's not gone, so to speak. When I leave, I'll send a helper. You know what I'm saying. Verse 34. When they had crossed over, they came to the land of Gennesaret. And when the men of that place recognized them, they went, sent out into the surrounding region, and brought to him all who were sick, and begged him that they might touch the hem of his garment, and as many as touched it were made perfectly well. I'm going to kind of end there quickly and pick up there next week, but basically, they crossed over and they came to this land of Gennesaret, which was the region, the same area. It's not just a town, but the same township or community or whatever that they had just left when they found out that John the Baptist was killed. So it was a surprising return to this Antipas territory. They're back in the territory of Herod, where they had just wisely moved from. So these people, recognizing Jesus and his disciples, then are begging him that they might only touch the hem of his garment. Sounds familiar, right? Perhaps this idea spread the woman with the issue of blood in that encounter where she crawled through, pressing in just to touch the hem, right? Now, Jesus allowed these kinds of things to happen, like Paul with his sweatbands. He would be, drying off a sweaty face. In Acts chapter 19, you read the people were healed by touching the sweatband. Or Peter's shadow in Acts chapter 5. He would walk by, and his shadow fell on people, and they were healed. But it was always made very clear. Jesus went out of his way through these other healings and cleansings that we saw. He went out of his way to assure them it was your faith and faith alone that made you well. There's nothing magical about the sweaty hat of Paul or the shadow of Peter or the hem of a garment. There are some people, some churches that would think if we just had a piece of that hem, we could run into every hospital and heal everybody. Just touch them, and they would all get healed instantly. Or you could run in and take off your suit jacket and start slapping people with it, and they would all be able to see. And just, it doesn't work like that. There's nothing magical. There's no trinkets. There's no superstition. It was their faith that made them well. It was because they believed. Now, if they needed something tangible to exercise that faith, if I could just touch the hem, Jesus would recognize, okay, I'll let you do that. But it's your faith that made you well. It's because you believe. Not your faith in hems, but your faith in who the hem belongs to. Your faith in Jesus, right? Next week, we'll get into that. Here he is healing these people, and we have these goofy dudes that show up, and they're like, yeah, so you're healing all these people, whatever, but we need to ask you a question. What's with all the hand washing? How come your disciples don't wash their hands? How ridiculous is that? The point is this. I heard the teaching I was listening to the other day. Pastor said, legalism makes you stupid. They were so legalistic about the hand washing and the traditions, they didn't realize feeding the 5,000. Well, that's great. You fed all those people. All right. The bread had never stopped. There was leftovers. Yeah. But you didn't wash your hands. I mean, come on. That's what we're looking at next week. So this is it. This is what the Lord's calling us to, right? There are some things in life that the Lord needs to teach us that will only be taught through hard stuff, through work, through things that don't make sense, through things that feel like they're killing us, through things that that are contrary. They rub us the wrong way. It's iron sharpening iron. It's abrasive, but it's intentional. It's supposed to be that way. Mike just reminded me of a very, very important principle that has to do exactly with this, right? These guys, these disciples in the boat could have missed the whole lesson if they were like, oh, this is spiritual warfare. We're under attack from the enemy. Let's just pray and stop rowing, and we're just going to pray and make it go away. We would not have the story or these guys. But they chose to see it, be obedient. Jesus said to keep rowing. We're going to keep rowing. He said, get in the boat, go to the other side. We're not going to stop till we get there. So what could have been spiritual warfare and an attack of the enemy also could have been the Holy Spirit or the Jesus teaching them and training them through some really hard stuff. And it's like that for each one of us. Every storm has the potential to be spiritually uplifting or a training opportunity, or you could just lay down and say, woe is me, I'm under attack. It's a spiritual warfare. It can be a beating or it could be a blessing all the time. The choice is yours. Are you going to be beat up, or are you going to be better because you cried out to Jesus and you used it for something? That's up to you. Every single time, it's up to you. Every single time. So people say, well, I don't know if the Spirit's leading me or if this is a spiritual attack. Well, pick one. It's whatever you want it to be. It's how are you going to react? How are you going to cry out to Jesus? What are you going to do with it? Are you going to be beat up, or are you going to be better? And these guys were better because they just kept rowing. They just kept going. And then Jesus showed up and did what he did. And they were like, oh, that's who I'm not. Look at how weak I am. Look at how powerful you are. Oh, I get it now. I get it. Because they went through that. You guys have any questions? If not, we'll just sign off tonight. Michael, it was good to see you. We'll catch you next time. Chapter 15 next week. We'll see you then.